Some people collect stamps, others collect coins or vintage records. Me, I collected stories. Stories told through rubies and pearls, through gold bands and sapphire earrings. Every piece in my jewelry box held a memory that money could never buy. My grandmother's wedding ring, my mother's pearl necklace, my aunt's sapphire studs. 12 pieces total, each one a chapter in my family's history. When my husband sold them all while I visited my sick mother, he expected tears. Instead, I laughed, because he had no idea what he actually sold. Before I tell you why I found his betrayal so amusing, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories about justice and women who refuse to be victims, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me tell you exactly why my husband's smug smile disappeared the moment I started laughing. My name is Belva, and at 32 years old, I thought I had built a good life. I worked as a senior accountant at a real estate firm in Denver, Colorado. The kind of job that required precision attention to detail and an ability to spot discrepancies that others might miss. Those skills served me well in my career. They also saved me from complete devastation in my marriage. I met Derek at a friend's barbecue 6 years before everything fell apart. He was charming, ambitious, and full of dreams. While other men talked about sports or complained about their bosses, Derek spoke about building empires. He wanted to create something from nothing, to leave his mark on the world. At 27, I found that passion intoxicating. Here was a man who wanted more from life, who refused to settle for mediocrity. We dated for a year before he proposed, and I said yes without hesitation. We moved into the small 3-bedroom house I had purchased 2 years earlier with my own savings. It was modest, but mine a point of pride that my mother had instilled in me since childhood. Always have something that belongs only to you, she used to say. Property savings skills. Something no one can take away. I thought sharing my home with Derek was an act of love. I did not realize I was also sharing my security with someone who would eventually try to destroy it. The jewelry collection lived in a small safe in our bedroom closet. Derek knew the combination because I trusted him completely. Why would I hide anything from my husband? Those 12 pieces represented 4 generations of women in my family, each one passing down not just metal and stones, but lessons about survival, strength, and self-worth. My grandmother's ruby ring came first. She bought it herself in 1958, 6 years after divorcing her first husband, who used to drink away his paychecks. She worked as a seamstress, saving every extra penny until she could afford that ring. It was her declaration of independence, proof that she could provide beauty for herself. When she gave it to my mother on her 18th birthday, she said, "Never depend on anyone else for your sparkle." My mother's pearl necklace came from my father, given to her the day I was born. He worked double shifts at the factory for 3 months to afford it. The pearls were not perfectly matched, slightly irregular in size, but my mother treasured them more than any flawless strand could ever be valued. She wore them at my college graduation, at my wedding, at every moment that mattered. Then there were my Aunt Ruth's sapphire earrings. Aunt Ruth never married, never had children of her own. She became my second mother during the years when my parents worked long hours to keep our family afloat. She taught me to cook, to balance a checkbook, to trust my instincts about people. When she passed away 3 years into my marriage, she left me those earrings and a note that read, "You always saw the real me. Trust yourself to see the real everyone else too." The collection also included a gold bracelet engraved with the names of 4 generations of women in my family. My great-grandmother's name came first, then my grandmother's, then my mother's, and finally mine. That bracelet was supposed to go to my daughter someday, with her name added to continue the chain. Derek's relationship with money was complicated from the start. In our 5 years of marriage, he launched 4 different business ventures. Each one was going to be the one that changed everything. The coffee shop lasted 8 months before mounting rent, and slow customer traffic forced us to close. The mobile app he developed with a college friend never gained more than 43 downloads. His cryptocurrency investments crashed spectacularly during a market downturn, taking $11,000 of our joint savings with them. Each failure wounded his pride deeply, and each time I was there to pick up the pieces. I covered our bills with my salary. I took out a small loan to pay off the coffee shop's remaining debts. I never complained, never pointed fingers. I believed in him, in us, in the idea that eventually one of his dreams would take flight. But something shifted about a year before that fateful trip to Montana. Derek became secretive about his phone calls. He started spending evenings at the library, researching what he called a major opportunity. When I asked questions, he deflected with vague answers about not wanting to jinx things. I told myself he was just protecting his new idea until he felt more confident. I told myself a lot of things back then. A week before I left to care for my mother, Derek suddenly took interest in my jewelry collection. He asked about each piece, about their history and their value. He wanted to see the appraisal documents I kept in a folder in my desk drawer. "That is beautiful craftsmanship," he said, holding my grandmother's ruby ring up to the light. "Have you ever had these professionally appraised?" I explained that my mother had them appraised 5 years ago before passing them down to me. The collection was worth over $180,000, mostly due to the quality of the stones and the historical significance of several pieces. Derek's eyes widened at the number. "We should probably increase the insurance coverage," he said. "Let me hold on to those appraisal documents so I can call some companies while you are away taking care of your mom." I handed them over without a second thought. He was my husband. He was trying to protect my treasures. At least that is what I believed. My mother's hip replacement surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday. I flew to Montana the Saturday before, wanting to help her prepare and to be there when she woke up from anesthesia. The surgery went well, but recovery was slow. She needed help with everything from bathing to cooking to simply getting out of bed. I extended my stay from 1 week to 2, calling Derek every evening to update him. Those calls grew shorter as the days passed. Derek always seemed distracted, excited about something he refused to discuss. "I have a surprise for you when you get home," he kept saying. "Something that is going to change everything for us." I assumed he was planning something for our upcoming 5th anniversary. Maybe a trip somewhere nice. Maybe finally finishing the backyard renovation we had talked about for years. I flew home on a Friday afternoon, exhausted from 2 weeks of round-the-clock caregiving, but happy that my mother was recovering well. Derek picked me up at the airport with a smile I had never seen before. Not the warm smile of a husband greeting his wife. This was something else entirely, triumphant, almost predatory. He barely let me set down my suitcase before making his announcement. We stood in our living room, afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows as he puffed up his chest like a rooster. "I made a major business move while you were away," he declared. "This is it, Belva. This is the one that is going to make us rich." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach, but I kept my voice calm. "What kind of business move?" His smile grew wider. "I sold your jewelry collection. Every single piece. They funded my empire." The words hung in the air between us. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to laugh and admit this was a terrible joke. But his expression remained fixed in that smug mask of self-satisfaction. "I got $47,000 for the whole collection," he continued, oblivious to the storm building inside me. "Already invested it in a real estate development project in Nevada. Ground floor opportunity. We are going to triple our money in 6 months. $47,000. For a collection worth $180,000. To fund another one of his doomed ventures." And then I started laughing. It began as a chuckle, then grew into full-bodied laughter that brought tears to my eyes. I laughed until my sides ached, until I had to lean against the wall for support. Derek's smug expression faltered, replaced by confusion and then anger. "What is so funny?" he demanded. "I just secured our financial future, and you are laughing at me." I wiped my eyes, catching my breath. "Oh, Derek," I finally managed. "Do you want to know why I am laughing?" He crossed his arms defensively. "Enlighten me." "I am laughing because you have no idea what you actually sold." The confusion on Derek's face would have been comical if the situation were not so serious. He had expected many reactions from me. Anger, certainly. Tears, probably. Eventually, grudging acceptance when his investment paid off. Laughter had not been on his list of possibilities. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice losing some of its earlier confidence. I straightened up, my laughter fading into something colder. "Those jewelry pieces you sold, every single one of them was fake. Cubic Zirconia Lab created sapphires, gold-plated brass. Very good replicas, but replicas nonetheless. Derek's face went pale. That is not possible. I had them appraised. The dealer said they were authentic. You showed him the appraisal documents I gave you, I replied. Documents describing the real collection. But the real collection has been sitting in a safety deposit box at First National Bank for the past 3 years, a box that only I have access to. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as the implications slowly registered on Derek's face. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands began to tremble slightly. 3 years ago, after you lost our savings in that cryptocurrency disaster, I made a decision. I had the entire collection professionally replicated. The fakes went in our home safe. The originals went to the bank. I never told anyone, not even my mother. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Because my Aunt Ruth taught me to trust my instincts about people. And something in my instincts told me I needed a backup plan. I just never thought I would actually need it. Derek collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. The dealer, he muttered, when he finds out they are fake. He will want his money back, I finished. Money you have already invested in whatever scheme convinced you to betray your wife. It is not a scheme, he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. It is a legitimate real estate development. Luxury condos in Las Vegas. I pulled out my phone and typed in the name of the development company he had mentioned during his grand announcement. The search results confirmed what I already suspected. 3 articles from business journals describing the project as a suspected fraud. Investors warned. Founders under investigation. I turned the phone screen toward him. Looks like your ground floor opportunity has a pretty shaky foundation. Derek grabbed the phone, scrolling through the articles with increasing desperation. No, this cannot be right. Marcus assured me the returns were guaranteed. He showed me the blueprints, the permits. Marcus, I asked. Let me guess. You met him at a networking event. He was driving a nice car wearing an expensive watch. He made you feel like you were being let in on something exclusive, something that ordinary people would never have access to. Derek looked up at me, and I saw the truth in his eyes. I had described his recruiter perfectly. I sat down in the armchair across from him, suddenly exhausted. You know what hurts the most, Derek? It is not the jewelry. It is not even the money. It is that you thought so little of me, of my family's history, that you felt entitled to sell it all without even asking. I was doing it for us, he protested weakly, for our future. No, you were doing it for yourself, for your ego, because you cannot stand the idea of your wife being the stable one, the successful one. You needed to prove that you could provide too, even if it meant stealing from me to do it. The words hit their mark. Derek flinched as if I had slapped him. Over the following hours, the full scope of his betrayal continued to unfold. The antique dealer, a man named Hoffman, had already paid Derek in cash. That cash was already wired to the investment company. The investment company was already being investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Derek tried calling Marcus. The number was disconnected. He tried emailing the company. No response. He tried accessing the investor portal where his account supposedly showed his growing returns. The website had been taken down. By midnight, Derek had cycled through every stage of grief. Denial had given way to anger, then bargaining, then a depression so deep he could barely speak. I watched it all with a strange sense of detachment, as if observing a stranger rather than the man I had married. What am I going to do? He finally asked, his voice hollow. Hoffman is going to discover the jewelry is fake. He will come after me. Yes, I agreed. He probably will. Can you talk to him? Explain that it was a misunderstanding. I let out a long breath. A misunderstanding implies an accident, Derek. You deliberately took my property, sold it without my knowledge or consent, and used the proceeds for your own purposes. That is not a misunderstanding. That is theft. But I am your husband. That did not seem to matter much to you when you emptied my safe. We sat in silence as the reality of his situation sank in. Derek faced potential criminal charges from Hoffman for fraud. He had no way to recover his investment, and his marriage, the one stable thing in his chaotic life, was crumbling beneath him. I stood up and walked toward the bedroom. I need to sleep. We can discuss the divorce tomorrow. Divorce, the word seemed to shock him back to life. Belva, please, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can work through this. I will get a job, a real job. I will pay back everything. Just please do not leave me. I paused at the doorway, looking back at the man I had loved for 6 years, the man who had charmed me at a barbecue, the man who had promised me the world, the man who had stolen my grandmother's legacy without a second thought. Do you remember what you said when you picked me up from the airport? I asked. You said you made a major business move. Not that you made a major decision about our future, not that you found an investment opportunity you wanted to discuss with me. You made a move, like I was just another piece on your chessboard. Like my family's treasures were just assets to be liquidated. I did not mean it like that. Yes, you did, and that is exactly why this marriage is over. I closed the bedroom door behind me and locked it. For the first time in years, I slept alone in my own bed. And despite everything, I slept peacefully. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal consultations, paperwork, and emotional excavation. Hoffman discovered the fake jewelry within 3 days. His personal jeweler examined the pieces and confirmed what I already knew: cubic zirconia where rubies should be. Lab-created sapphires instead of natural ones. Gold plating wearing thin to reveal base metal beneath. Hoffman was furious. He filed a police report for fraud and demanded either the return of his $47,000 or the authentic jewelry he believed he had purchased. Derek had neither. The money was gone, swallowed by a con man in Nevada. The real jewelry remained safely locked away, and I had no intention of surrendering my family's legacy to clean up my husband's mess. Derek's sister flew in from Seattle when he called her in a panic, threatening to harm himself if I went through with the divorce. I had been down this road before with him. The threats always emerged when he felt cornered, when his back was against the wall. But I had learned through therapy and hard experience that responding to manipulation with compliance only encouraged more manipulation. I called Sarah myself before she arrived, explaining the situation clearly and calmly. I told her about the jewelry, the fake collection, the investment scam, and Derek's history of financial disasters. I told her about his threat and asked her to take it seriously while also recognizing it as a pattern. To her credit, Sarah listened. She spent 3 days with Derek, helping him find a therapist and connecting him with a debt counselor. She also told me privately that she was not surprised by any of it. Derek had pulled similar stunts with their parents years ago before I ever met him. She had hoped marriage would settle him down. Instead, it had simply given him a new victim. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. The house had always been mine, purchased before the marriage with my own funds. Derek had never contributed to the mortgage, never paid property taxes, never invested in improvements. My lawyer confirmed that he had no claim to it whatsoever. Our joint savings account held less than $2,000, depleted by Derek's various schemes over the years. He had also accumulated significant credit card debt in his name alone, debt he had hidden from me until the divorce proceedings forced full financial disclosure. Looking at the spreadsheets my lawyer prepared, I realized I had been supporting a man who was simultaneously driving himself into financial ruin. The criminal case against Derek proceeded separately from our divorce. Hoffman pressed charges aggressively, and Derek faced felony fraud charges that carried potential prison time. His public defender negotiated a plea deal. No jail time, but Derek would have to complete 200 hours of community service and make full restitution to Hoffman over a 5-year period. Given that he had no money and no job, those restitution payments would define his life for the foreseeable future. I received the final divorce decree on a Tuesday afternoon in March, exactly 4 months after I had returned home to find my husband celebrating my betrayal. The paperwork felt anticlimactic somehow. A few signatures, a few stamps, and 6 years of marriage dissolved into nothing. My mother called that evening. She had followed the situation from Montana, offering advice and support throughout the process. But this call was different. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something about your grandmother." "What about her?" "That ruby ring. The one she bought herself after her divorce. There is more to that story than I ever told you." I listened as my mother unraveled a piece of family history I had never known. My grandmother's first husband had not merely been a drinker. He had been abusive, controlling, dangerous. He had isolated her from her family, controlled her money, and convinced her that she was worthless without him. When she finally escaped with nothing but the clothes on her back and a determination to survive, everyone told her she would fail. a divorced woman in 1952 with no education and no skills. She proved them all wrong. That ring represented more than independence. It represented resurrection. She started over from nothing, my mother continued, rebuilt her entire life through pure will and stubborn refusal to be defeated. When she gave me that ring, she told me our family produces women who do not break. We bend, we adapt, we survive. And then we rise. I held the phone to my ear, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, tears of recognition. You survived something hard, sweetheart, my mother said. But this is not the end of your story. It is just the end of a chapter that never should have been written in the first place. Healing did not happen overnight. For the first 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I moved through life on autopilot. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, repeat. The house felt too large, too empty, filled with memories I was still trying to process. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Patterson, a soft-spoken woman in her 60s who had a gift for asking questions that cut straight to the heart of things. In our sessions, I began to understand patterns I had been blind to for years. How I had mistaken drama for passion, how I had confused potential with reality, how I had given so much of myself to someone who saw giving as a finite resource to be hoarded rather than a renewable energy to be shared. The hardest realization came during our 4th session. Dr. Patterson asked me to describe the moment I fell in love with Derek. I told her about the barbecue, about his ambition and his dreams. "And what did he love about you?" she asked. I opened my mouth to answer, then stopped. I tried to remember Derek ever expressing specific admiration for my qualities, my achievements, my character. What came to mind instead were his comments about my salary, my savings, my house, his appreciation for what I had rather than who I was. I think I said slowly he loved what I could provide for him. How does that make you feel? The tears came before I could stop them. Used. It makes me feel hazed. That was the turning point. Acknowledging the truth, as painful as it was, freed me to start building something new. I threw myself into work with renewed energy. My attention to detail and ability to spot discrepancies had always been valuable, but now I brought an intensity that surprised even myself. Within 6 months, I was promoted to Director of Finance, a position that came with a significant salary increase and a corner office with a view of the mountains. I used part of my increased income to buy a new condominium downtown. Selling the house felt like shedding old skin. Too many memories lived in those walls, too many arguments and disappointments, and quiet desperation. The condo was smaller but brighter, filled with large windows and clean lines, and absolutely no traces of Derek. I also joined a support group for women recovering from financially abusive relationships. I had never thought of my marriage in those terms before, but listening to other women's stories, I recognized the patterns. The gradual erosion of autonomy. The constant cleanup of someone else's messes. The guilt trips when we tried to establish boundaries. The way our ambitions and dreams slowly shrank to make room for someone else's endless needs. In that group, I found sisters I never knew I had. Women who understood without explanation. Women who celebrated small victories and held space for setbacks. Women who reminded me that recovering from betrayal was not linear, that bad days did not erase progress. 1 year after the divorce, I took my mother on a trip to Italy. We spent 2 weeks wandering through Rome, Florence, and Venice. She had dreamed of this trip her entire life, but never thought she could afford it. Standing with her on a bridge in Venice, watching the sunset turn the water to gold, I understood what my grandmother must have felt buying that ruby ring. The profound satisfaction of providing beauty for yourself and the people you love. I wore my grandmother's ring throughout that trip. The real one finally retrieved from its safety deposit box. I wore my mother's pearl necklace to a fancy dinner in Rome. I wore Aunt Ruth's sapphire earrings to an opera in Florence. Each piece felt like armor and blessing combined, connecting me to a lineage of women who had faced hardships I could barely imagine and emerged stronger. I heard through mutual friends that Derek was working as a line cook at a restaurant downtown, slowly paying off his debt to Hoffman. He had apparently dropped the entrepreneurial dreams, at least temporarily. Whether that change was genuine growth or just exhaustion, I could not say. And truthfully, I no longer cared. He occupied no space in my thoughts, commanded no energy from my spirit. He was simply someone I used to know. My jewelry collection now sits in a beautiful display case in my new condo, visible every time I walk through the door. 12 pieces representing 4 generations of women who refused to be defined by their hardships. My great-grandmother, who immigrated with nothing. My grandmother, who rebuilt herself from the ashes of a bad marriage. My mother, who worked 2 jobs to give me opportunities she never had. My Aunt Ruth, who lived life entirely on her own terms. And now me. Belva. A woman who learned to protect herself without becoming hard. Who learned to trust again without being naive. Who learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is loving yourself enough to walk away. The gold bracelet still has room for another name. Maybe one day I will have a daughter who will add hers to the chain. Or maybe I will pass it to a niece or a goddaughter or a young woman I have not yet met who needs to know she comes from a line of survivors. These stones have witnessed 4 generations of women overcoming impossible odds. Now they witness me living the life I deserve, not the life someone else designed for me, not the life I settled for out of fear. The life I chose, built with my own hands, sustained by my own strength. Some people ask if I regret marrying Derek, if I wish I could go back and make different choices. The honest answer is no. That marriage taught me things I needed to learn. It showed me my own blind spots. It forced me to develop survival skills I did not know I needed. And ultimately, it led me here to a life more authentic and fulfilling than anything I could have imagined. The rubies still sparkle. The pearls still glow. The sapphires still catch the light in ways that take my breath away. But their beauty is nothing compared to the woman I see reflected in them. A woman who bends but does not break. A woman who rises. I want to ask you something before we end. Have you ever had to set boundaries to protect yourself from someone you loved? Have you ever discovered strength you did not know you possessed? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need this message. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about real people facing real challenges and finding their way through. And remember, no matter what you are going through right now, you come from a long line of survivors. Their strength lives in you. Thank you for watching, and may you always have the courage to protect what matters most, especially yourself.